Eric Schoenberg is a rich guy who's part of a group called Patriotic Millionaires, and he's releasing his own tax returns and doing a breakdown of it so you understand exactly how this Republican tax plan is a giant giveaway to the wealthy.
In 2015, my wife and I had an adjusted gross income of $1.3 million, on which we paid total income tax of $325,000, or just under 25%. Now, you might think this tax rate is low for $1 million plus income, and I would agree, but that's because the system is already biased in favor of rich people by taxing investment income at lower rates than labor income. For example, line 7 of my return shows that my wife and I were paid just over $35,000 for teaching various university classes. For most Americans, wages, salary, and tips covers the vast majority of their income. But for us, that amount is small relative to our income from investments. For example, line 9 shows that we had $203,000 in dividends, and line 13 shows that we had $315,000 in capital gains. And here's the thing, salaries and wages face a top income tax rate of about 40%, but dividends and capital gains face a top rate of only 24%. That means that a lawyer or athlete who had a salary that matched my income in 2015 and had the exact same level of deductions would have paid almost $40,000 more in tax than I did. Think about that. For two people with the exact same income, the person who is already rich pays less tax than the one who isn't. The bipartisan tax reform of 1987 briefly eliminated this difference. But this Republican bill would make the problem much worse by also lowering the rate on pass-through business income, which is included in line 17. I had $705,000 of this in 2015. While Republican spin has been that rich people will pay more under their plan because of the elimination of deductions, I estimate that our tax bill would have been over $100,000 less under their plan, saving over 30% of my taxes. Imagine the billions this will save the Koch brothers, or Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, or Donald Trump. He claims this bill will cost him a fortune.
This is going to cost me a fortune, this thing, believe me.
I claim that tax reform is his greatest con ever, allowing Trump to turn a $50 million investment in his campaign into billions in tax savings.
Yep, that nails it. So for those of you who don't know the details of exactly what he's talking about there, one of the things that I find unconscionable and is never spoken about, I'm not sure I've ever seen a mainstream media segment about it. I'm not sure I've ever seen a candidate on the Democratic side bring it up. Maybe Bernie Sanders has brought it up, but if he has, I haven't seen it. Capital gains tax versus income tax. So most rich people, they don't make their money from a job. They don't make their money from working for somebody. They don't even make most of their money from having their own business and making most of their money from their own business where they're the boss and they have people working under them. Most of them make most of their money from betting on the stock market, from investments. So when you make money through the stock market, that rate is significantly lower than the income tax rate. It used to be 15%. It's a little higher now, but for a long time it was 15%. But stop and think about that. So if you're somebody, let's say you're a surgeon and you make a lot of money. You're one of the best surgeons and you make $1 million a year. Well, since you're working for a living, the top marginal rate for you is going to be 39%. But if you're Mitt Romney and you made $1 million a year, well, he made it from his investments. He's paying 15% on that money. So the guy who sat on his ass all day and let his money make money in the stock market, he pays way less in taxes than the person who works for it and made that money. That's so backward. I mean, there's an argument to be made, hey, that should be linked. It should be the same rate for both of them. But actually, probably the stronger argument is it should be a lower rate for the person who worked for it, and the person whose money made money, it should be a higher rate. But that's the way it's always been this way in the U.S., where if you're already rich, and your money makes money through the stock market, you pay less in taxes than somebody who works for a living. And he gave the example of an athlete there or a lawyer. You know, they do well. Professional athletes do well. Lawyers do well. But they pay a higher tax rate than somebody who's just making money from their investments. I mean, that's really fucking unconscionable when you think about it. Now, the other thing he explains is how... So he says he paid... how much did he make? Over $1 million, and he paid $325,000 in taxes. He would save $100,000 more. So, and he's describing how there's a trick in this bill. It's a pass-through corporation tax cut. And basically what that means is you could be a rich person and you say, no, now I'm going to file as a pass-through corporation. And then your top tax rate, it is 39% now. They cut that top rate to 37%, but they also will allow rich people to file as a pass-through corporation, and then that 37% becomes 30%. So this is a historic tax cut. That's what we're talking about here. You know, the top tax cut, the top tax rate, marginal tax rate under Bush was 35%. This basically makes the top tax rate 30% because all these rich people are going to go, yeah, why would I file as an individual and pay 37% when I could just file as a pass-through corporation and pay 30%? And then we haven't even gotten into the other ways in which this is a massive giveaway to the rich, like getting rid of the estate tax. And by the way, look at who benefits from this. Trump and his fucking shitty kids benefit from this. And it's hilarious because the Republicans make the argument of, come on, personal responsibility. You got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You got to have work ethic. Well, actually, no. What they're in favor of is massive welfare to the kids of rich people. They didn't earn that money. Their parents or their grandparents earned that money. But they're just going to be able to pass it on. And according to Republicans' own logic, they say, no, you can't just give people stuff. This isn't fair. This isn't just. They need to work for it. Apparently, except when it comes to rich kids, in which case we want them to be welfare queens. We want to give them as much money as possible. The only time we're angry about people getting free money is if it's some poor black family that's getting welfare, barely getting by, and just barely being able to feed themselves and keep the fucking lights on. Then they're pissed. Oh, my moochers. But apparently you're not a moocher if you just can hand billions of dollars off to next of kin. So... real estate, big break on real estate as well. I don't think he got into that in that little clip there, but that looks to be the deciding factor, the provision that finally pushed this thing over the edge. You had Bob Corker, a Republican, saying, I'm not going to vote for it because it adds over $1 trillion to the deficit. Why would I do that? I'm a deficit hawk. I don't want to add to the deficit. Well, wow, they go into a smoke-filled back room, they come out, all of a sudden Bob Corker's for it. Why is he for it? They added a special tax break on people who hold real estate, LLCs holding real estate. Bob Corker's got $7 million of investments on that front. So he would save about $1.1 million per year. All of a sudden, deficit doesn't matter much because he's personally enriching himself. This is a terrible tax bill. And again, I don't even think he got into what happens to the rate for poor and middle class people. So up front, there are some middle class people who get a break. But of course, there's a sunset provision on the breaks for regular people. There's no sunset provision on the breaks for the rich. That's permanent. But when it comes to regular people, sorry, within 10 years, you get a tax hike. You get an increase. If you make $75,000 a year or less, your tax bill is going to go up. And by the way, we're not even factoring in what's going to happen with, for example, the spike in your premiums. Because another portion of this tax bill gets rid of the individual mandate for Obamacare. So you're going to get a spike in your health insurance premium like 20%. So it depends how you do the math. But if you do the math, factoring everything in, you probably get a tax cut right away. I mean, this bill also, is going to, in the long term, take a chunk out of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. It's going to cut those programs. So here you have a rare instance of somebody coming out who's a traitor to his class, and he's being honest about what's going to happen, how the overwhelming majority of the cuts go to the rich. In the long term, there's a tax hike on poor and middle-class people, how this thing was crafted of, by, and for the corporations, of, by, and for the rich. So I just want people to understand this, the people who think that Republicans are looking out for the little guy. Because that was one of the reasons Trump won, is that, he made the forgotten man will never be forgotten again. Look at me, I'm so populist, I'm against NAFTA, I'm against TPP. I want to cut your taxes. This is what they say. It's what he still says now. They just lie. They just go out there, oh yeah, I'm looking out for the middle class. That's why I want to cut your taxes. Right, because there are so many middle class people that are going to fucking register as a pass-through corporation and they're already in the top tax bracket. That's not the case, by definition, if they're not in the top tax bracket. So they're lying to you. They're lying to you. They're lying to you. They're lying to you. And the result is going to be shifting more of the national tax burden onto you and away from corporations and the rich.